Dave Reel says, do you believe that if we travel far enough into the infinite universe, we would encounter another Earth chock full of Earthlings? Yes and no. No, but the number, think about evolution of life on Earth and the existence of human beings, Homo sapiens sapiens, for those of us who are on the ball. If you think of it as a pachinko ball, where you launch a ball into a series of pins and it hits a pin, it bounces either left or right. It comes down to another pin, bounces either left or right. A pachinko ball, a pachinko machine, is a series of these pins where balls are dropped and randomness sends them left or right. And sure enough, if you drop enough balls in a pachinko machine, you get a beautiful bell curve where most of them are in the middle, and a few of the outliers, just through random chance, have gone left, 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 left all the time. Most people go left, right, left, left, right. But you flip a coin enough, every now and then you're going to flip 10 heads in a row. Take a long time, but it'll happen. So the reason I think this is an interesting question is, no, the number of coin flips it's taken to get us here is so many. There's so many that the chances of something coming out that look even remotely like us is essentially zero. But the reason this question is interesting is because if you say that, that is an admission that you do not know how to handle the concepts of either infinity or eternity. Because if the universe is infinite and eternal, it's not, but it might be close. If the universe is infinite, that means that there are millions of planets exactly like the Earth. I did a science fiction story once where there's planets exactly like the Earth, indistinguishable, except the Coke cans are blue. That's the only difference. What's the chance of that happening? It's 1 in 100 billion trillion 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 trillion. Well, never going to happen. That means you don't understand infinity and you don't understand eternity. Because if you actually could get your monkey brain, this is what I'm talking about. This is a big breakthrough for me. We just don't have the neurons. Because if we did, we'd understand that if the universe were infinite and eternal, and it's probably not either, but if it were, then there would be endless numbers of Bill Whittles having this show exactly like right now, except that picture of Dave Bowman would have been played by a different actor. That's what infinity and eternity is now. We talk about a spin-off of this is this idea of the infinite universe, where every time any decision is made, and I don't mean a human decision as to whether or not to build a building here or to shoot a tyrannosaur, and we step off of the path, anytime rain falls, a drop of rain goes one way or another way. Every time something random happens, it creates a separate universe and spins off and forms a separate reality, and there's an infinite number of those. Where would you put them all? Well, who cares where you put them all? If there's infinity, you got all the room in the world. And if there's eternity, you got all the time in the world. Nobody really understands either of those two things. Infinity and eternity are so far beyond our ability to get a handle on. We talk about the terms, and we're comfortable talking about them. We say eternity, it's going to be here forever. Oh, okay. What was here before it? What do you mean? Is this what I'm talking about? When people criticize either the Big Bang or God, take your pick. The criticism comes down to, what was here before God? Who created God? What was here before the Big Bang? What was there before the Big Bang? What do you mean before? Well, what was here before? It's always been here. Yeah, okay, but okay, yeah, sure, it's always been here, but what was here before it got here? There was no before it got here. That's where we stop. That's no matter. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Albert Einstein. I don't care if you're Thomas Sowell. I don't even care if you're Neil deGrasse Tyson. You do not have the neurons to process infinity. You have the neurons to look at the shadow on the back of a cave that infinity makes, but you don't have the neurons to process actual infinity or eternity. For example, Big Bang theory is internally consistent. There's an enormous number of independent pathways for evidence that suggest that something very much like 15, 16, 17 billion years ago, the entire universe was in an infinitely small point of infinite density and infinite temperature. What does that mean? What do you mean, what does it mean? It was infinitely hot and infinitely dense. Yeah, how hot and how dense was it? It was infinitely dense. You can't fit the entire universe into a speck the size of an atom. You can fit it into something smaller than that. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to your monkey brain. there's pretty good evidence of the Big Bang Theory. In fact, there's very good evidence. Something like the Big Bang Theory actually happened. And so there's this flash. And the universe expands out, right? And everything that becomes galaxies and stars and people is inside this expanding bubble that's being created through the universe. And in the first, couple millionths of a second, the expansion is tremendous. And then, you're not even a second into the universe. 2 or 3 seconds into the universe, the expansion slows down, blah, blah, blah. We got all this worked out. It's amazing what we can do with these hunks of jelly. Really is breathtaking. But the universe is expanding, and everything that we know of, including the laws of matter, the laws of nature, are inside the bubble, right? Not just space, not just matter, all the rules that govern space and matter are inside the bubble. What's on the other side of the bubble? What do you mean? Well, what's on the other side? The bubble is expanding out into something, right? What's on the other side? There's nothing on the other side. What does that nothing look like? Is it white? No, you don't understand. Well, I mean, is it infinite? Is it does it have matter? No, there's nothing there. Well, when you say there's nothing, does that mean there's like space-time and planets on the inside and nothing on the outside? There is no outside. This is the kind of thing that interests me so much, because we can talk about it and we can be comfortable with it. The universe is expanding, and now the bubble is this big, and the question is, will gravity be enough to slow down the expansion of the universe and bring it back down to another point, and you have an oscillating universe? Or is the universe not enough gravity so that it keeps expanding forever? These are the big questions, and we can handle these questions. We're good at these questions. We can handle them. One of the big questions in astronomy, it's starting to look like, I forget which way it's starting to look. I want to say it's starting to look like it's not going to stop. I think that's the latest evidence. So, big bubble exploding, right? And all this bubble is expanding out into nothingness, and there's gravity, because this stuff all has mass, and the gravity of each thing pulling against each other is slowing it down. And the question is there enough stuff inside the bubble to create enough gravity to eventually slow this, stop it, and then let gravity bring it back together again? Or is there not enough stuff in the middle of the bubble so that the bubble slows down? Yes, it's slowing down, but there's not enough. It's going to just keep going forever and ever and ever. Great. Fantastic. Can we process this? Yes, we can. Absolutely. That's within the ability of the human mind to reason. What's beyond the human mind to reason is what's on the other side of the bubble. Now, physicists will tell you nothing, and mathematicians will tell you nothing, and people will tell you that there's no structure, there's no space-time, it's not a vacuum, there's just nothing. There's nothing there. There's no laws of nature, there's no nothing. But we can't handle that. We think we can, but we can't handle it. We can understand that we can't handle it, and we can do the math around it, but we cannot comprehend that if empty space is a perfect vacuum that consists of 3 dimensions or 4 or 5, that there could be something on the other side of this universe bubble that has no dimension, no time, no space, no structure. We can't comprehend it. We don't have the neurons for it. We do have the neurons to make a map. We do have the neurons to make a sketch. We have the neurons to do the math, and that is miraculous, noble, magnificent, and all those other things. But I don't care who you are. You cannot get your head around eternity or infinity. You think you can, but you can't. So when you hear somebody like Dawson in the God, what is his book about? The God Hypothesis? I forget. When you hear him saying, well, the reason there's no God is because you then have to ask yourself, what did God evolve from? What created God? Who was there before God? Well, Dawson, Richard, there was nothing before him. Well, he had to come from somewhere. No, he didn't. And look, I'm not trying to make a religious argument. When you apply the same thing the other way around, you can say, well, the Big Bang can't be true because what created the Big Bang? What created that little dot? What do you mean? Who put it there? Nothing put it there. Well, what was there before it? Nothing. It's always been there. It's always been there. Always. There was no time. It's always been there. You just can't get through it. It stops. I personally am fascinated by this, and I'm also fascinated by how short are we. In other words, if you take human IQ at 100, and let's take the IQ of physicists and Einstein, 160, 170, 180, 190. There's some evidence that that the smartest person who ever lived, I don't know how they figured this out, but some studies have been done that said probably the brightest guy who ever lived might have been Isaac Newton, who might have had an IQ of 200, which is, On paper, it's twice human intelligence, twice normal human intelligence. I don't know how that really boils out. But if you just take the IQ measuring system as a yardstick, I've always been fascinated to know what IQ would you need in order to actually understand infinity in the way that we understand things like the dimensions. Forget how it works, just the dimensions of the cell phone. Yeah, I can wrap my hand around how big this is. What would it take? Would it take an IQ of 300? Would it take an IQ of 1,000? I said Dawkins. Who did I say? Anyway, God Delusion. Yeah, I probably got his name wrong. Thank you, Eisenfire, who stands outside the door with his flaming sword and makes sure that I don't make mistakes that last any longer than the lag on the show's production broadcast. The fact that Richard Dawkins can say, well, what came before God, means that Richard Dawkins doesn't understand eternity, and neither do I. But he thinks he does, you see? And I'm smart enough to realize I don't. Neil deGrasse Tyson thinks he's got everything figured out. He's sure he's got it all figured out. No, he doesn't know anything. Tyson and other professional astronomers and the smartest cosmologists and the smartest quantum physicists that we have are able, through incredible feats of intellectual achievement and standing on the shoulders of giants, they are able to produce a series of sketches, maps, and models that give them enough of a shadow idea of what's actually going on so they can make predictive statements. And this is an enormous achievement. I don't mean to put it down, but they don't understand this stuff. When we talk about strong nuclear force or gravity being exchanged by the exchange of particles, we don't really understand that. You know, I was looking out the window of my bedroom not too long ago. What's wrong with my nose tonight? I was looking out the window and a star was setting. I want to say it was probably Rigel. I seem to remember it was Rigel, which is in the foot of Orion, which is thousands and thousands of light years away. And I've got enough of a monkey brain to understand that the light that's entering my eyes right now was emitted from what was created at the center of a thermonuclear explosion 2,000 light years away. It's much hotter than going on in the sun, that this actual photon of light had to work its way through millions of years to get to the surface of this blue giant named Rigel, which exists out in space at this distance. And then it got to the surface, and then all of a sudden it just took off, and off it went. And this particular photon went sailing out through an infinite number of degrees and seconds and arc seconds and milliseconds of arc in a horizontal plane and a vertical plane. It just happened to go off in a certain direction. And it spent 2,000 years or whatever the distance to Rigel is. Somebody just tell me how far Rigel is. You know what, distance to Orion. I can't stand it anymore. I can do this faster than it does. Probably just ask Siri. Don't anybody tell me. I'm not even going to look anymore. I'm not just curious. This is the amazing thing about the world we live in. I want to know on my own. Oh, okay. 772.9 light years. So, I'm looking at Rigel setting over the Santa Monica Mountains. I'm lying in bed. I'm awake. I happen to be awake. I happen to have enough of the window blinds open. I happen to be looking out the window. I happen to be lying in bed. I happen to be aware of seeing this particular star, and I happen to be thinking about it. So 772 years ago, this, in the year 300 or something, 1300 rather, Dark Ages, this photon decides to leave the surface of Rigel, and this photon travels through the void of space during this entire time. You know, the Crusades happen, the Dark Ages happen, you know, there's the founding of the Declaration of Independence, the French Revolution happens, the Civil War happens, this little photon is marking its way through the universe at 186,282 miles every single second. And it and the rest of its brothers are just heading out somewhere. And then, next thing you know, there's the incredible moment where the universe stands still on April 7th, 1959. The incredible birth occurs in New York City. It's not even done yet. It's still got another 55, 56 years to go. And for the final 55 years at 186,282 miles a second, this little photon goes flicking through the universe, comes beaming in through the atmosphere, cuts through the atmosphere, just barely clears the top of the mountains, goes right through that little slot in the blinds of my window, and hits the outside of my eyelid because I happened to be blinking at that second. So that particular photon I did not get to see, but a millisecond or two later, my eyes are open again, and the guys who've been following right behind it, I do get to see. Now, how many photons have to be emitted by Rigel in order for enough of them to be able to penetrate both of the slightly millimeter or two width of my pupils on a given night. How many, forget about the timing of me watching it. Just take any observer who's sitting there looking. How many photons does this thing have to push out? If you think about what the dispersion, what the arc second dispersion is for that beam to get into my into my iris, this makes me think that the idea of photons as particles is not, it just can't be true. I'm not trying to say that photons don't exist, because we do a lot of experiments that say that photons exist. What I am saying is that this idea of a particle, of a little dot, of a little grain of salt that's glowing and floating through space at the speed that enters my eyes, is a model. It's a mathematical construction that gives us some idea of what's happening, but it can't really be it. It has to be something much more organic. I don't want to say organic. Much more complex than this, right? You know, when we say that the strong nuclear charge is transferred by a certain particle, that I'm emitting particles, and that the planet is emitting particles, and my particles are attracting the Earth, Earth's particles attracting me, gravitons and all that. Look, all I'm trying to say is this. I'm not saying that these theories are not useful, and I'm not trying to claim that these interactions don't occur. What I'm trying to say is that this is the monkey brain trying to get a handle on something that is far, far, far beyond our ability to actually genuinely comprehend. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say that as we get more advanced and we start getting into more advanced models that are more explanatory, things like superstring theory and so on, this is an incredible achievement. It's an amazing achievement. It sounds like I'm putting it down. I'm on the contrary. But I am saying that superstring theory, the idea that the universe is vibrating along strings that are made out of in 11 dimensions, and that they're creating physical reality, is yet another magnificent attempt of this little piece of gray cantaloupe to understand something that is so complex that we can only sketch it the way we can sketch a map of Texas, in the way that a map of Texas is not Texas. String theory, particle theory, photons, all this stuff is not the reality of the world. The reality of the world is more complex, not only more complex than we imagine, it's more complex than we can imagine. This is what fascinates me, and this is where I kind of take this back into the political world, because we have this perpetual arrogance of thinking that the model is the reality and that the map is the territory. They're not. They're not. The world is much more complex than this. It's much, much more complex than this. You cannot get to what is really happening. You can only approach it. And likewise with something like the economy. You cannot control the economy. You cannot command an economy. You got 7 billion people making individual decisions. That is not something that is predictable, plannable, or controllable. And it's orders of magnitude simpler than what we're talking about with all this subatomic particle stuff. I guess I'll wrap up the show by saying this. We're going to do more astronomy. I've got 2 more pages of questions. It'll be at least a 4-parter, I would think. But if you want to ask me what astronomy has done for me, is astronomy has confronted my intellect with problems that are so complex, so monumental, so big, that you cannot not only can you not understand them, the only thing that you can come out of this with is an appreciation and an admiration for how much we are able to do with such simple reductions of the actual universe. It's really astonishing when you think about it, how much we are able to do and build upon how little we actually know. As we speak at this very second, no matter where you are, see, right now, you're watching the show. Some of you are watching the show live. And so those of you who are watching the show live, who are commenting in the comment stream right now, are hearing words that I uttered about 7, 8, 10 seconds ago. Many of you will be watching this on YouTube. You'll be watching the show that I uttered, words I uttered weeks ago, days ago, weeks ago, months ago, maybe years ago. Who are we kidding? Most of you who will be watching this show in the vast galactic empire will have been listening to words that were uttered thousands, if not millennia ago, because this wisdom, of course, is eternal, will be studied for the rest of time. So for those of you who are sitting on the planet Trantor, 75 million years from now, trying to understand what drove the 21st century, welcome, greetings. But, think about it. Just think about it for a second. Right now, you're hearing my words. You're trying to follow where I'm going with this, but you're not listening to me in real time. Everything I've already said, I've already said. And now you're hearing what I said when I stopped talking. And further down in time, we cannot function. We cannot get through our lives with an awareness of that kind of awareness. All we can do is that we can occasionally filter out everything else, filter out why the electricity is on, filter out why the air conditioning is on, filter out why my cells are creating energy and maybe not as much cortisol as I should use, but something. Why during this entire time has my heart been beating and my lungs been breathing? Why all this stuff has been filtered out, the vibration of the electrical field that's creating the LED lights around the creatures in the background, all that stuff goes away. We just assume that it's there, but it's all operating, and we have to filter all this stuff out. And we can, if we decide to, take all of this perception and concentrating exclusively on why the LED lights are working behind my Gorn Captain. And then we can take that laser beam of perception that filters out all the rest of this stuff in your family relationships and what's happening with your mom and who's going to play quarterback for the Gators next year and all that other stuff. And then we can move that spotlight from why are the LEDs functioning on that Gorn Captain to who played the actor who was in that rubber suit in 1966 or 1967. What was his name and is he still alive? And then we can take that little spotlight and shine it elsewhere. But even when we focus it, we're only getting a little bit of it. And the fact that we're not thinking about who that actor is, where is Keir Dalia right this second? Where is he right this second? What's he doing? Him, right now. What's he doing? We've been watching the show for an hour and a half. We've watched the show for 2 hours, 4 minutes, and 55 seconds, and nobody's been thinking about what's been happening to Keir Dalia right at this very second. So my point is this. Look, there is so much that we don't know. There's so little that we can think about at any given time that when we start acting like we know what we're doing, we better sit down and say, what are the parameters upon which our expertise is being based on? Do we have, in fact, the ability to make a decision in confidence? What assumptions are we assuming? What are we filtering out? This is what astronomy will lead you to if you think about it long enough, because ultimately when it's all said and done, it produces a sense of enormous humility in you. Does in me anyway. And that's when I hear stuff like this from Neil deGrasse Tyson, or when I hear Stephen Hawking talking about what's good for people politically, or when Albert Einstein says you cannot simultaneously prepare for peace and war at the same time. I say, Albert, what the hell do you know about human interaction? You know nothing about human interaction. Nothing. And people that cite you as a source are using it as a source of laziness so that they don't have to think for themselves. Well, Einstein says you have to be a pacifist. What does Einstein know about being a pacifist? Einstein knows something about cosmology. Einstein knows something about gravity. Einstein knows something about electromagnetism. Einstein knows something about relativity. He doesn't know anything about war and peace. Anything. He knows less than a farmer about war and peace, because a farmer deals with life and death on a daily basis. This is what I'm talking about, right? This is what I'm talking about, is getting out of the arrogance of assuming that your area of expertise applies to areas that it doesn't. And also a realization of just how shallow your area of expertise is, no matter how deep it is relative to other people. You got to come from a place of humility on all this stuff, because if you don't, you're going to get into trouble. And that's when you get into people like Hillary Clinton, who are convinced they know what's best for everybody, and they don't. People would say, well, Bill, you've got this incredible perception and you've got this great sense of perspective and humility. Why don't you tell us what you think would be best for other people? And my response would be, what the hell do I know about what's best for other people? If I was given absolute authority, the first thing I would do is, and I mean I would do it instantly, if somebody said to me, here is unlimited political power, it's yours, the first thing I would do is I would eliminate my political power. And I'd do it quickly before I succumb to the temptation to do some good with it. If I was president of the United States, I would make one executive order. And my one executive order would be to invalidate every existing executive order. That would be my executive order. Executive Order 2917 voids all existing presidential executive orders. That's what it does. It voids them. It voids them within 6 months. And now you can get the legislature to go ahead and approve things that need to be approved. If they need to be continued for whatever reason, then get them in front of the Congress and have them debated the way any other law would be done. That's the first thing I would do as president. I'd make an executive order that made I'd make two. One would void all existing executive orders, and the second one would make executive orders illegal. Bam. That's what I would do. That's what the study of astronomy has taught me. It's taught me the humility of how little I know. It's taught me how much I don't know. And I think about the days I went around sure that I knew the answers to all this stuff. I knew the answer to God, the universe, and everything. I knew how we got here. I knew where we were going. I knew how big the universe was. I knew what it was made of. I knew how many people there were out there. I didn't know anything, and I still don't. It's not to say you can't know it. It's not to say that it's not worth trying to know it. It is to say that you better have some humility strapped to your belt in place of your six-shooters, because you are going to be making assumptions no matter what you do, and the best we can hope for as human beings is to at least have some vague idea of what those assumptions are so that we can keep some kind of perspective. That's about it.